Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at the latest album from Whitechapel entitled The Valley. And may I say that with the release of this album, we can officially say that the deathcore genre and all of its pioneering bands have grown the fuck up, and I'm so happy for it. We've seen so many bands changing their sound drastically in these last few years. Suicide Silence took influence from the Deftones and Korn and brought it into the 21st century with more mature lyrics and soundscapes. Bring Me the Horizon, who arguably pioneered the whole genre on their debut album, they're playing like really moody experimental pop rock, and they're doing songs with Grimes. They're nominated for Grammys now. And then there's Job for a Cowboy, who shocked everyone a few years back by going in the opposite direction and going full-blown technical death metal on Sun Eater. And that brings us, of course, to Whitechapel, who have also changed a lot in these last few years, incorporating influences from groove metal as well as new wave of American heavy metal into their sound, implementing clean vocals as well, playing on some of the band's southern influences and the grooves as well. Definitely straying a little bit from the core, but definitely also retaining more of the core than most of the bands I've just mentioned. Honestly, these changes aren't quite as drastic as some people like to think, especially when compared to all the other bands we just mentioned. But what the fuck do I know, because people still flip the fuck out nonetheless. You're selling out, man, whatever, it's not fucking deathcore, it's not fucking brutal. Like somehow it evaded all of these people that Whitechapel was eventually going to grow up and eventually expand their sound, just like most bands. If you're one of those people who has spent these last few years just complaining about that, then I would highly recommend you stay the flying fuck away from the Valley and maybe just stick to those early tunes that you love so much. Go back to the glory days of being a fucking frat boy with a muscle shirt and pounding Four Loko, because that's clearly all you're interested in. However, if you're like me and you're coming in with an open mind and you're actually really interested to see how Whitechapel continue to expand their sound, then congratulations, you may have stumbled upon their best album yet. I mean that sincerely. I think The Valley is nothing short of an incredible feat of songwriting, brutality, and general musicianship. It's an album that's so fucking good that I frankly would have never imagined Whitechapel ever making an album this fucking good, which isn't to say that they are untalented or anything. It's just considering that they are like one of the quintessential brocore bands out there. I never expected them to go to the emotional depths that this album goes to. I never would have expected them to expand the way that they expand here. I never would have expected them to make this album, plain and simple. What makes the album stand out immediately is its emotional core. Now, I've talked a lot about the emotional cores of records in regards to albums from Behemoth, Architects, and many others. And that sometimes it is the emotional core rather than the music itself that propels an album to new heights, that propels a band to success. We definitely saw this in the case of the Architects record, which I thought was frankly mediocre at best musically speaking, but goddamn it was an emotional ride lyrically and personally for the band. And of course Behemoth, as we've seen in their most recent records, both of which I would consider to be among some of the best black metal of the 21st century. But an emotional core like this is not something I've seen in deathcore, which is odd considering how inherently, objectively emotional this genre is. It is a genre almost specifically about rage and emotion. But as far as I'm concerned, it just goes to show just how fucking amazing Whitechapel's songwriting is and how mature they've become in these last few years. What propels the emotional core on this record is Phil Bozeman himself. Now, if you notice on the album cover, it specifically says, based on true events, and that is specifically referring to events within Phil Bozeman's life. Phil has always been really open about his relationship with his parents, as well as growing up where he's from in Tennessee, but he's never really applied it to music in this format. He's never been quite this revealing. He's never been quite this open and dramatic and powerful. It's noted immediately in the opening song when a demon defiles a witch, which tells us a lot about Phil's relationship with his mother, as well as his mother's mental health and the relationship that his mother shared with his stepfather at the time. Consequence of Sound even goes as far as to say that the song is specifically about a demon that would haunt Phil's mother. Quoting directly here, Bozeman's mother had journals that she kept writings in all of the things that she experienced with this being, and these journals actually contained lines and phrases that Bozeman would use as lyrics for the track in certain places. such as burn the bed, burn everything, it's a lie anyway. The original writings of the journals concur that she referred to herself as a witch and talk about how the demon would sexually assault her in her own bed. There's a lot to unpack there, a lot, and that's without even addressing that the demon could still very easily refer to Phil's stepfather abusing his mother. And what makes it all the more terrifying and potent is that Phil was there for all of it, reflecting in this lyric, "What has the world come to when a demon defiles a witch? Nobody trusts a word I say. I can't erase these memories, but I will erase humanity." That is some powerful shit, and it gives us an insight as to Phil's mindset regarding all of this, implying that perhaps his path towards deathcore and this aggressive music was simply a way of him trying to cope. He even specifically says, "I can't erase these memories." And it's felt in his vocals, man. This is his best vocal performance ever. And I'm not just talking about on this song, I'm talking about the entire album. I mean, on a musical level, he's bringing out all the goodies. Clean vocals, pig squeals, low, demonic, harrowing gutturals. But the emotion that comes forward is remarkable. You really do see yourself in his shoes because he puts you there directly through his performance. And it gets deeper and it gets more personal and more depressing as well on other tracks. Take, for instance, Hickory Creek, which is directly about his own mother, and he further details the complicated relationship that they shared, but in the end, despite everything, he did still love her. Saying, "I left so long ago, you never noticed I was gone. Now that you don't have eyes, maybe now you'll realize. Within your own head, you're creating these lies. For what it's worth, you're still beautiful, but beauty lies within the eyes. This path is comforting, but now I'm left to sing this song alone." There's a real story there, man. There's a story there about how his mother's mental health deteriorated and eventually he couldn't be around it and she never noticed and maybe she didn't care, and despite all of this, he still really cared for her. And you don't just feel that in the lyrics, you feel that in the performances as well. Hickory Creek is a track that is almost entirely clean vocals, borrowing a lot from the Stone Sour playbook, might I add. And while Phil's vocals are not exactly the most technically proficient, they are powerful. You feel everything he's fucking feeling, especially with such warm acoustic guitars apart that eventually launch into thick, dirty, drudging riffs accentuating that pain. Not gonna lie, it's a genuinely emotional moment for me because I have a bit of a complicated relationship with my mom, and it was something I thought about in the track Hickory Creek. I never thought in my life I would find that I would be able to relate to the fucking brocore band Whitechapel, but here I am. It's definitely the most progressive and emotional moment on the record, which is saying a lot considering how much Whitechapel changes things up. And also a lot considering the final track, Doomwoods, takes things to even more dramatic territory, musically speaking, with its multi-changing verses and its incredibly powerful guitar performances and its chilling ending. Another track that wins me over emotionally, Forgiveness is Weakness. It's a relatively short track, in fact one of the shortest on the album. But this is where Phil really unleashes himself lyrically and emotionally, as in regards to the anger that we expect typically from deathcore. Like Hickory Creek was about him coming to terms with his mother's health and admitting that despite all of it, he still very much cared for her, whereas Forgiveness is Weakness, directed towards his stepfather, is the exact opposite, and he makes it very clear that he is very happy that he is dead. And this isn't me making assumptions, he says it in the beginning. He is finally dead, come celebrate this day. It was slow and full of pain, good riddance. We all know you're going to hell, come back to life and I'll send you myself. Dig the casket from the dirt, you don't deserve to be one with the earth. And anyone worried that the record becomes overbearing at a certain point and loses focus on the fact that it is in fact a metal album, do not worry, because these tracks are damn aggressive, and there are plenty of other damn aggressive tracks to continue complementing them and provide genuine balance and variety to the record. Take for instance Black Bear, where Whitechapel fully embraced the groove metal sound of their last few records, almost to a Gojira-like effect. Or Brimstone, which perhaps comes the closest to Whitechapel fully dipping their toes back into deathcore, with hellish lead guitars in the album's closing, pounding double bass, pure death metal carnage, and those rhythm guitars all combining into a great big explosive number. Honestly, the only real complaint I have is that these songs are not nearly as inventive as some of the other tracks on here. And I also think that there's some issues with the general songcraft. As much as I love the opening track, When a Demon Defiles a Witch, there's a really interesting slow piece in the middle of the track that feels less effective because it's immediately followed by a Slayer-like onslaught of guitar solos. But these are minor complaints. If we're being honest, I'm almost nitpicking on that last one in particular. Whitechapel have impressed me big time on this album. Like I said before, a lot of deathcore bands have grown up and matured big time in the last few years, but I don't think we've seen any of them at the same time releasing an album as big and as genuinely entertaining and enthralling as this. This is Whitechapel's most adult record. It's their best written record. It's their best performed record. It's generally their best fucking record yet. I to the point where I have trouble seeing how Whitechapel will top themselves on a future album. I was almost tempted to go 5 out of 5, but I do reserve that for an album that is truly, truly perfect, and my nitpicks do personally prevent me from saying that it is fully a perfect record, but it is nonetheless a 4.5 out of 5. Like I said in the beginning, if you're just pining for the glory days of This Is Exile and you don't want anything to be progressive or modern, you just want to fucking pound some fucking beer and party at the Rockstar Mayhem Festival or whatever, then this record ain't for you. You're wasting your fucking time. And on that same note, if you're not willing to acknowledge the emotional core of this record is also a waste of your time. I've seen a review from No Clean Singing that pretty much ignored everything in regards to the actual songwriting of this album and basically just said, it could be heavier, clean vocals suck, I won't tell you what to think, but I will say if you have that mindset, just stay the fuck away. You're wasting my time, you're wasting Whitechapel's time. To everyone else, I highly recommend this. Whitechapel have released their best album yet and a serious contender for Album of the Year, and that's saying a lot because this month in particular, we've already seen some incredible high-profile releases. You know, it's funny, I think this record also kind of proves once and for all that not only has deathcore grown up, but that deathcore is in and of itself kind of a phase, you know? Like, I know it's such a joke to hear, like, all these edgy kids be like, it's not a phase, Mom! But with The Valley and all these records where we see deathcore bands evolving into new territory, kind of is a phase. I think this proves it once and for all. But I don't mind, because if this is the new direction of deathcore, if this is what I can expect from future Whitechapel records, then I am so fucking happy that what they did before was simply a phase. It's heavy, it's emotional, it's unlike any other deathcore album you'll find out there. 4.5 out of 5. Check this thing out immediately. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.